Domestic violence is costing our country millions of dollars. Women who escape abuse are ending up in jail. They're ending up in prison for fighting back. They're ending up in courtrooms. They're ending up in prostitution. They're ending up drug addicts, alcoholics, to numb the pain of the abuse. It's literally costing our country millions of dollars. My name is Dorian, and this is me 10 years ago, after I escaped violence in my home, which required 2 years of homelessness in safe houses, confidential shelters, while my ex-husband stalked me, contacted relatives to try to find me. I have a lifetime protection order against him in place, and he was still able to stalk me. When you look at me in this picture, you have no way of knowing that I had survived multiple head injuries, multiple broken bones, psychological, mental, and emotional torture. I've been raped several times, but by looking at me in this picture, you can't see my wounds. You don't know me. I'm not famous. And you know why I'm not famous? Because I'm alive. Only the women that are abused until death become famous. You don't know me because I now live in poverty. You've never seen my face in the news or on the internet because I'm alive. Our country only focuses on the victims who die. The victims who live are hidden away in poverty, raising their children. We're being denied benefits. We're being discriminated against. We're being re-victimized outside our home. But we're alive. If Nicole Brown Simpson had taken her children on the run and embraced poverty and been homeless and lived in safe houses, would she be famous today? Would we know her face? Would we see her pictures if she were alive but living in poverty? For women who leave abusive situations and are too damaged to be employed and have children who are traumatized, their only option is poverty. This is a picture of the view that I had from the home that I lived in where there was violence. In order to escape the violence, this is the view from the home that I now live in. When I lived with a violent man and I needed to find a house, this is where we went. Now, my housing needs are met in this manner. This was how I traveled to the store when I lived in violence. I also traveled in this. Now I travel to the store like this. When I lived in a home with violence, these were the streets that myself and my children were able to walk on. This is me now, walking on the streets in my current neighborhood. This is where I shopped when I lived in a home with a violent man. This is where I shop now. In the neighborhood where I was being abused in the home, this is the number of registered sex offenders. Now that I'm living free of abuse in my home, this is the number of sex offenders in my current neighborhood. When I lived in a home where I was being beaten, I was free from housing discrimination. Now that I'm no longer being abused inside my home, this is what I experience when I try to find housing. I'm being discriminated against. I'm being rejected. I'm being told that because I need to get assistance from Section 8, that I'm not allowed to rent property. When I received a broken nose and a broken collarbone, this is where I went for my resources. Now that I'm no longer receiving broken bones and black eyes and being slapped in the face, this is where I go now for my resources, for myself and my child. These are some of the foods myself and my child were able to eat when I was being beaten. This is how we eat now. When my husband was threatening me and calling me a whore, this is how I paid my bills. Now that I'm free from abuse within the home, this is how I don't pay my bills. I applied for disability over a year ago with medical records, police, court records, a lifetime protection order against an ex-husband who threatened to murder me, and put it in writing. And yet I've been denied disability. I paid into this for many years before I was married, and yet Social Security is denying me any assistance because they are in denial themselves about the problem of violence against women. This is the church I attended with the man who used the Bible to beat me over the head, threatened to murder me, yet stood alongside me in church, raising his hands and worshiping God. This is where my daughter and I worship God now. It's the only safe place for us. When I had dental needs, this is an example of where I would go to get those needs met when I was in a house filled with violence. Now when I have dental needs, this is where I go. This is me now. My name's Dorian. I'm alive. I'm free from violence inside my home, but the violence outside of my home, in my neighborhood, with the systems that I'm trying to navigate with the discrimination that I've been experiencing when trying to find housing, with the judgment, with the blame, with the shame, I can understand why many women with children stay. When a society doesn't understand or feels powerless to change something, they cover their eyes and they cover their ears and they look the other way and they pretend it isn't happening. That's exactly what a woman who lives in a violent home does. How can we blame her for surviving inside the home? Because the violence inside is something she knows. It's something that she's able to control in her mind. She covers her eyes, she covers her ears till she no longer feels it. She no longer experiences it, which is what society does to a woman who escapes alive. They cover their eyes, they cover their ears, because now she's poor. And because society can't change poverty, they ignore it, they reject it, they fear it. So you tell me, is it safer for a woman to experience violence inside her home, where her children are provided for, where they're not homeless, where they're in safe neighborhoods with decent schools, safe streets with crosswalks and sidewalks, no sex offenders lurking around? How can we blame these women when we're not there for them when they leave, when we are not supporting them, when we look the other way because we feel powerless? Do we really want these women to leave? Or do we want them to continue hiding? Do we want them to live in shame? Do we want them to keep wearing makeup to cover their bruises so we don't have to face the facts until we see their face on the internet because they've been murdered? When are we going to start giving attention to the women who survived, to the women who are alive, to the women who escaped? What's it going to take for society to come out of their denial before it's too late?